Well, today is Good Friday, and this is the day we pause to remember all that Jesus accomplished for us through his death on the cross. There were so many things going on that day that started the evening before. After Jesus and his disciples went to the garden and he prayed, he was arrested there, and throughout the night underwent a series of trials in front of high priests and Roman rulers and back and forth and all of these kind of things until in the early morning hours he was back at the court of a man named Pilate. And here's where we want to pick up this morning in Mark chapter 15, verse 6. At the festival, Pilate used to release for the people a prisoner whom they requested. There was one named Barabbas, who was in prison with rebels who had committed murder during the rebellion. The crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do for them as was his custom. Pilate answered them, "Do you want me to release the king of the Jews for you?" For he knew it was because of envy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd so that he would release Barabbas to them instead. Pilate asked them again, "Then what would you want me to do with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Again, they shouted, "Crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Why? What has he done wrong?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. And after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified. Now, Barabbas' story is really interesting. When you look at the accounts that all four gospel writers give us, they paint a picture of a man who was a violent thief who would likely had been involved in murder and even an insurrection to try to overthrow Rome. He deserved to die according to the legal system of that day. What's interesting is, in this instance, we see Jesus take Barabbas' place and die the death that Barabbas was destined to die. What's so fascinating is, after this moment, Barabbas disappears from history. We don't see him anywhere else in Scripture. We know nothing else about him from secular history or early church history. Nobody knows what happens to him. Over the years, people have speculated. Maybe he went back to his life of crime. Maybe he transformed and started following Jesus and left all of that behind. Or perhaps he just went about his life and lived out a quiet remainder of his years. We just don't know. And if I'm honest, I think God may have done that on purpose. Because we get so caught up in these kind of things that we often miss what God's trying to teach us. You see, through what Jesus did for Barabbas that day, he was giving us the clearest picture of what Christ would be accomplishing on the cross. Again, Barabbas was destined and deserved to die. Jesus didn't. And yet, through Jesus' love, his mercy, and his grace, history came together in this moment so that Jesus would go to the cross and Barabbas could walk free. The same is true of you and me. Jesus, on Good Friday, took our sin upon himself. He died on the cross, and then we'll celebrate on Easter that he rose from the dead to show that he'd paid that penalty. Paul states it this way in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. He made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Jesus died in our place just like he did Barabbas. Now, the rest of Barabbas' story is unknown. But again, it doesn't really matter. The question for us today is, how am I going to respond to what Jesus accomplished for me on the cross? Am I going to just go about my life? Am I going to try to go back to what I've always done? Or am I going to take some time today to reflect on the fact that God loved me so dearly, so deeply, so richly, that he would die in my place and be raised from the dead? My hope and my prayer is that on this Good Friday, you'll be able to take some time to really think about and celebrate and remember all that Jesus accomplished, and that the rest of your story would be a life lived out with Christ as your Lord and your King. We look forward to worshiping with you tonight on our Good Friday service at 6 o'clock. We hope you can make it, and we'll celebrate with you then.